Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dark Signs and my Dungeon 23 project. Let's go ahead and talk about the construction of a dungeon and its rooms. It's this fun little balance of plausibility versus fun. So the first thing we need to do is choose whether we're going to be having a dungeon that is underground or a dungeon that's above ground. This is important because subterranean dungeons, ones that are underground, allow for tunnels and extremely odd shaped rooms. If we take a look at old school dungeons, obviously most of these are underground. And so they have really strange long hallways or maze like interiors. This can be easily solidified with the natural obstructions that were too difficult to tunnel through. And above ground should make use of typical building layouts, where the walls of each room create various structures, and the walls of the rooms will be shared with the halls and hallways. Just imagine it like a floor plan. Here's the thing though. Depending on the game you're running, you can have this flexibility and have varying degrees of that believability. Super high fantasy settings or just games that are more whimsical, you can do whatever you want with these rooms. They don't have to be believable. And so it's still important to recognize fun when you're creating these. Let's take my dungeon, for example. It's beneath ground, and it is the first floor, simply known as the Underchurch. It obviously takes place beneath a church. And now because of this, I have this cross between building design and below ground dungeon design. The section that we're seeing me build right now is where the acolytes of the church level would be living. And so with that in mind, we want to take note of the golden rule in dungeon design. In its most basic form, this is multiple paths. There's different degrees in which you can follow this. Multiple paths, looping areas, intersections, general player agency. And so what this means is that typically you should have rooms that connect to rooms, that connect to other rooms, which can then lead back to central areas. Does this mean that every single room needs this quality? Does this mean that your entire dungeon needs to follow this rule to a T? No, it doesn't. There are variables for everything and reasons for everything. If you feel like this particular hallway should lead back to a singular room with no outlet, then you should do it. This is only highly recommended because it allows players to approach different scenarios in different directions. To make things even more appealing to players is having these areas be unlocked through different gameplay bits. Maybe they need a key or a spell, or they just have some sort of idea to access it. This once again affirms this player agency, and it fulfills the sense of wonder of what is around that next corner. So let me present this situation to you. As a player, would you rather be in a hallway with just two doors, or would you rather be in a hallway that has a broken pillar leading up to a hole, a gate on the far end with a lock on it, and two doors on either side, one that is heavily damaged? The next thing that we want to talk about are different room shapes, like L-shaped ones, circular, or whatever you want. You want to vary up room shapes because it keeps the players guessing on what could be in the next room. If everything is just a bunch of squares and hallways, they might become a little bored with the exploration because they know what's on the other side. Same thing for symmetry. Now, of course, certain buildings are going to have some type of symmetry to them, and that's perfectly fine for something like a battle map. For example, my church that's above this dungeon is fully symmetrical. If I wanted to make it into an interesting dungeon, I could have either changed some of the room sizes, or I could have made it so that part of the room has been destroyed or altered in some way. Maybe a wall has collapsed. And so when we come back to normal dungeon design, where we're doing subterranean dungeon, to avoid just doing rectangular rooms, or maybe you already have a bunch of rectangular rooms and you're not sure what you want to do with them. With this, we can add some sort of natural element. Maybe the roof is caved in. Maybe a portion of the room is inaccessible. Maybe there are perilous paths within the rectangles. A great example of this is if we look at the Bloodborne Chalice dungeons. Pretty much every single room in the Bloodborne Chalice dungeons, they're rectangles. They are squares. There's nothing really different about them, besides how they decorate them and how they treat them on the interior. Some rectangular rooms have a narrow bridge going right through the corridor with things at the bottom. And so here's the problem with just remedying the rectangular and square rooms. They are nowhere near the level design from other From Software equivalent sprawling dungeons. There are so many looping passages, shortcuts, and overall better room design than just the rectangular rooms and corridors of the Chalice dungeons. And so one of the things that I focused on while creating my dungeon is creating a believable space within the context of fantasy that has interesting variety, various shortcuts for future areas, and a few looping spots to keep that wonder factor going. I highly recommend to look at some of your favorite maps across any game and just get the inspiration for what makes that level design so fun. Even though we interact with the environment in a virtual, three-dimensional way on some type of system, good level design can still be translated through the basics of this purpose. And so this is what my dungeon looks like at the end. Now, is it the most interesting right now? No, it's just the first 7 rooms. We're going to be making this dungeon way more dynamic, creating a lot of looping paths and more shortcuts. And you'll see that in the following videos. Don't forget to subscribe and keep up with the series, especially if you're working on your own Dungeon 23. I would love to hear about what you're doing. I would love for you to show me what you're doing. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. I just want to give a huge shout out to my Eldritch Evokers, and that is Jeffrey Perez and Kitty Reaper-san. I also want to thank my Dark Delvers, and that is Daijobu, Ryan Malley, Samuel Day, and Michael. And then one final thanks to all my Secret Seekers. I hope to see you all in the next video.